Sung Jinwoo just initiated the attack on the colossal giant. We see Biru ushering a war cry which rallies the ants and gives them a boost, so to speak. The shadow giant begins rushing at full speed towards the colossal giant's location, and the closer and closer they get, the bigger he is. Sung Jinwoo, Biru, and Eager stay behind to watch the first charge from a distance. As if a flip switch, the giant suddenly gets active. He stomps the ground, creating a massive shockwave towards Sung Jinwoo's army, and with one swing of his sword created this massive slash that went as far as the eye can see. From this angle you can see it completely eviscerated everything in its path, from shadow soldiers to buildings. Jinwoo thinks to himself, what terrifying strength. He wiped out over 100 of my soldiers with a single swing. The beast was a terrifyingly massive being, and he emitted such a menacing energy that Sung Jinwoo almost wanted to make a run for it. It was an unpleasant feeling, and he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. But he thought to himself, from his experience, there are two ways to get rid of unpleasant feelings. You can either A, run away from what's causing your discomfort and forget about it, or B, completely root out the source of the problem. The shadow giants were the first to make contact despite the army being divided in two by the giant slash. But despite them being giants themselves, this final boss was on a completely different level. He easily took out the first two that made contact. However, the first giant created an opening for the ants. They began to swarm and eat at the flesh of the left foot of the giant. But unfortunately, the force of the swing of one foot was enough to knock most of them off. Biru sees what just happened to his ant brothers and feels the urge to join the fray. But that urge subsides when Jinwoo raises a hand, and he tells him not yet, now is not the time. He thinks to himself, I expected this much, and I still have enough mana, I need to keep attacking until I find his weakness. Meanwhile, we're shown the giant smashing and destroying everything Sung Jinwoo throws at him. But of course they're shadows, and no matter how many times they're destroyed, they keep on coming back, and the system shows a meter of his mana slowly draining. Jinma makes contact and attempts to stab him in the torso with a trident, but it doesn't break through the skin. We're shown the depletion of Sung Jinwoo's mana starting to speed up. Jinwoo ignores his mana meter and keeps sending everything he has at him. He thinks to himself his whole body is shielded in mana as if he were wearing armor. I guess that's why he's not defending himself, because he's that confident. But he did block an attack once before. That revelation prompted him to summon Kaisel. It's time to get active. He tells his two generals, let's go, and he mounts Kaisel with Egress while Biru takes to the skies. Biru, flying at hypersonic speeds, is the first to make contact, and he aims for the eyes. And shockingly, this prompts the giant to dodge, which is unusual considering he hasn't felt the need to dodge or block most of their attacks. The point of view switches to Egress, who is now the sole rider of Kaisel, raising the Demon King's blade in the air, summoning a tremendous amount of lightning. He swipes his sword and sends a massive amount of lightning towards the neck of the giant, and for only the second time he dodges like Neo in the Matrix. After watching the two attack attempts, Jinwoo says, I knew it. And the giant wastes no time returning a massive slash of his own, which was too fast for Kaisel to dodge, and he takes the brunt of it. The giant smiles, thinking he defeated one of the pests, but then his smile turns to shock, as we see Egress, still wielding the Demon King's blade, running up his arm. And now at almost point blank range, he fires another massive lightning strike, but the giant manages to block it with his hand just in time. This attack creates a lot of smoke and dust, and out of the dust we see Sung Jinwoo using his invisibility, and manages to land an attack on the giant's right eye. And once again he says, I knew it, he found the giant's vulnerability. Biru follows up his attack by running his claws across his face. We're shown the damage he caused ran from the top of his forehead to his bottom left cheek. Jinwoo then summons Commander's authority, and we see the swords materialize from the shadows. Point of view pulls back to show us Sung Jinwoo, Egress, and Biru focusing their attacks on the giant's face. Watching from afar with Jinho, Hanekawa says this is no longer a battle between hunters and beasts. This battle is between monsters. Jinho is just watching like a proud little brother who's happy to be there. Point of view switches back to the battle, and excuse my language, but the giant's face is fucked up. Commander's authority activated, Jinwoo prepares his final attack. He says the word mutilation. Initiates this attack flurry that lives up to its name. Destroys the giant's left eye, and large amounts of blood splatter into the air. At this point, almost swimming in blood, Jinwoo calls out for Biru. Flying as fast as he can, Biru says, your wish is my command. And he dives headfirst straight into the eye socket of the giant. Sung Jinwoo begins spamming mutilation like we've never seen before. I think he's doing so to give Biru a little bit more time to get active, as we're shown Biru tunneling deeper and deeper into the eye canal of the giant. So suddenly the giant stops, and blood erupts from his mouth. Creating a boom that probably shook the earth, the giant drops to his knees, signaling that Biru had made it to his brain. The system notification pops up saying, you've defeated the enemy. Sung Jinwoo and Egress take a minute to admire their handiwork, but something's wrong. He finds it weird that the system notification said, you defeated the enemy. Still pondering this while ore farming on a building, Jinho pulls up and says, sir, that was amazing. I can't believe you took down the boss of the giants. And Jinwoo thinks to himself, the system didn't say you defeated the dungeon boss. This raid isn't over. There was no black smoke either, which means I can't extract his shadow. And then just in case, he tries to extract it anyways, and the system sends a notification saying shadow extraction cannot be used on this target. And he says, I knew it. He pauses and thinks about the situation for a second. Then he motions to Jinwoo, telling him to stay back. And then from the mouth of the colossal giant we hear, my king, which startles Jinwoo for a second, but then we see Biru, who says, it is I. Jinwoo releases a sigh of relief and says, oh, it's you, and thinks to himself, the giant is dead, yet he still has enough mana to mask Biru's presence. Suddenly there's a loud spark at the gate, a spark that gets increasingly louder the longer it goes. A powerful mana storm, Jinwoo says. The mana moving in and out of the gate is enough to hurt a regular human, so he looks back and thinks, what happened to Jinwoo? And then with another sigh of relief says, woo, thank God, after seeing Egress shielding him from the mana. Now that Jinwoo is safe, he looks back to assess the situation, because what is going on? He realizes that the gate isn't releasing mana, it's absorbing mana, specifically from the giant. He thinks to himself, I got cut from just the mana alone. This has never happened before. He tells Jinwoo to wait here while he scopes out the inside of the gate, and Jinwoo says, please, be careful. And with a single leap, he heads into the gate. He made it to the other side to see something completely unexpected. He found himself in the middle of a massive throne room. He says this place is massive. Well, I guess that's why the giants were able to pass through. Suddenly we hear a loud laugh from the end of the corridor. Biru emerges from his shadow and says, my king, do you hear that? Jinwoo says, yeah, you too? An enemy just broke through the gate and yet they're laughing. Interesting. And he tells Biru, let's go. The laughing continues, and at the end of the corridor there's a man who says, how amusing indeed. You hear the clank of his chains shaking and hitting each other while he says, you despicable rulers. Luku has come to see me first. And while the point of view changes to show a massive man in chains, he says, welcome, monarch. Jinwoo thinks to himself, is this guy the boss? The mystery man then says, free me from these chains. I know what the rulers have planned and I must inform the other monarchs. Then he pauses for a second and takes Sung Jinwoo into account. He says, you are not the one I know. Jinwoo asks, did those rulers or whatever you call do this to you? The giant replies, they are trying to use me as a stepping stone to lay the groundwork for the real war that is to come. Jinwoo thinks to himself, I've consistently tried talking to beasts with intelligence, but none of them are able to explain their origins. He asks the giant, who are these rulers you speak of? And he answers simply, they are longtime enemies of the monarchs. Jinwoo thinks to himself, enemies of the monarchs? Does this make them my enemies too? Out loud he says, then the fact that you're chained up means... Giant cuts him off and says, yes, I too am a monarch. He continues, all the monarchs and rulers are probably after you, but right now you don't have the strength to face all of them. You'll need allies to fight back. Undo my seal, and I shall help you. Jinwoo replies, you're telling me you, a beast, will help me, a human? You really expect me to believe you? The giant smiles and says, then I shall make you believe. Then begins speaking what we know as to be the language of the magic beast, but you see mana flowing from the words. And suddenly he gets an alert from the system. The message reads, the king of the giants, the monarch of the beginning, Legia, has cast a skill, Pledge of Trust. Then it provides a description. Once the Pledge of Trust, which is an exchange, is accepted, the caster and the acceptor will not be able to lie to one another. Accept the Pledge of Trust, yes or no? Jinwoo thinks to himself, the king of giants, huh? What should I do? After pondering it for a moment, he says yes. He accepts. The system says the Pledge of Trust has been initiated. The caster and the acceptor cannot lie to one another until both parties mutually agree to terminate the contract. Now that the pact is accepted, Legia repeats his offer. Release me from my seal and I shall help you. Jinwoo replies, alright, I completely trust, and before he can finish his sentence, he's cut off. He can no longer speak. Legia says, that is the Pledge of Trust at work, and due to its restrictions, you cannot lie. Jinwoo responds, I see, but more importantly, how are you able to converse freely with me unlike the other magic beasts? Magic beasts? Legia asks. Jinwoo says, yeah, monsters that come out the gates. And Legia says, you mean the denizens of chaos. Actually, I'd like to ask you something in return. How could you place the denizens of chaos on the same level as the monarch who rules over them? The denizens of chaos that emerge from the gates are stragglers, soldiers that have become captives of the ruler's army after suffering defeat. And because they've spent an eternity in captivity, it's no surprise that their sense of self is destroyed. But I am a king, so unlike them, I have held on to my sanity. I have been patiently waiting for the chance to escape their grasp. And then I met you. Jinwoo asks, by the ruler's army, do you mean the guys clad in silver armor with wings on their backs? Legia replies, yes, those are the ruler's soldiers. Jinwoo follows up by asking, well, why do those damn rulers keep sending us beasts? Legia just looks at him and smiles, a devious smile from ear to ear. I said before, they're preparing for war, Legia says. They wish to turn this world into a battlefield and fight against the monarchs once more. A little confused, Sung Jinwoo says, I don't quite follow. They're trying to turn Earth into a battlefield by sending us beasts? How does that work exactly? Responds, they're doing it for a simple reason, and that is to imbue the world with mana. Magic beasts that emerge from the gates are viewed as a curse. The mana that comes out of the gates is viewed as a blessing. Many people share this belief as well, not just hunters. Objects that contain mana, such as mana crystals and essence stones, are currently the greatest sources of energy in the world. The rulers were using them to lay the groundwork for war, Sung Jinwoo thinks to himself. Legia continues, there's no better way to propagate power that doesn't exist than to use the blood of those who possess that power. That is why the rulers decide to use their prisoners of war. The density of mana is growing by the day. You could say they've cultivated a field fertilized by the blood of magic beasts and are ready to reap the fruits of their labor. Mana strengthens the world, so they plan to create a world that cannot be destroyed by the shock of war. Jinwoo says, so by war, do you mean? Precisely, a rematch between the monarchs and the rulers. We're shown a silhouette image of both parties. The first one is the monarchs, and of course the white angelic looking beings are the rulers. Legia continues, before long, the world will turn to a living hell. That's why there's no time, you must free me. Once word of our meeting gets out, both the monarchs and the rulers will no longer stand by and just watch. In fact, envoys of the rulers may already be on the move. Jinwoo says, you keep speaking as if those bastards are out to get me. Why is that? Legia responds, you really don't know anything, do you? The power you possess is not actually yours, and the fact that such power was given to you means the rightful owner betrayed the other monarchs, which means you have become an enemy of both the monarchs and the rulers. However, I alone swear to fight alongside you, so won't you help me? Jinwoo takes a moment to process all the information he just received. Then says, if you simply wish to stand with me, then wouldn't it be better for you to become one of my shadow soldiers? And as he says this, a brief silhouette of Ashbourne flashes in front of him. Legia notices it and is taken aback for a second, but then when he blinks a few times, he turns back into just Sung Jinwoo. To answer your question, the monarchs and rulers have astral bodies that are destroyed upon death so they can't be turned into shadows. That's why I cannot become one of your soldiers. Now, have I given you enough reason to help me? Jinwoo thinks to himself, I understand the situation now, but why do I feel so uneasy? I must be overlooking something. He summons his daggers. Legia demands that he releases him from the chains. Jinwoo decides to ask one final question. You said you'd be right by my side, right? And Legia says, yes, of course. You help me, I shall return the favor. This is a fair and complete deal between two monarchs. Jinwoo cuts the first set of chains, freeing his right arm. Legia thinks to himself, for a split second, I thought I saw him, referring to Ashbourne. Was I just hallucinating? He looks down at his right arm that is now free from the chains. Jinwoo asks the question, does that mean you'll stand with humanity? And for the first time since the start of this encounter, Legia is at a loss for words. Jinwoo doubles down. Why aren't you saying anything? Is it because of the pleasure trust, he says while tightening his grip on his dagger. Point of view zooms in on Legia to show us a small pink stone lodged in the back of his neck. Jinwoo says that essence stone on the back of your neck. As long as you have that, you'll hear the voices of the rulers. You're being told to kill the humans, right? Just like the other magic beast are. Suddenly, without warning, Legia reaches forward to grab Sung Jinwoo. Sidesteps the attack and says, I'm calling off our deal. Immediately plunges his daggers deep in the chest of Legia, saying, I can't let you live. You are too much of a risk. If you were to cause a calamity, the blood will be on my hands. Legia replies, you're wrong. I'm not the calamity. You are. He unleashes a monstrous roar as he attempts to attack Sung Jinwoo for a second time. Before he could even get within reach, Sung Jinwoo hit him with multiple slashes. Legia begins coughing up blood, but he's not done yet. Swings at Sung Jinwoo for a third time, but Sung Jinwoo is just too quick. He gets within close quarters and begins repeatedly stabbing him in the chest. Bro getting nasty with it. He hitting him with that While coughing up more blood, Legia says, as the fight between humans and the captured denizens of chaos escalates, the world will transform further and further into a bloody battlefield. I pray that all you wish to protect is burned to ashes by the hellfires of war. Sung Jinwoo just looks at him for a second and says, that's not gonna happen. Sung Jinwoo receives a message from the system telling him that he's defeated the dungeon boss just as he politely removes his head from his shoulders. And another message pops up saying, you defeated one of the 9 monarchs, the monarch of the beginning, Legia. He begins walking back towards the gate's entrance while Legia's head is still rolling around. The system then says, calculating XP, you have earned a large amount of XP, the calculation may take a while. Jinwoo says, it's too bad I won't get a shadow soldier, but I'll take this as my prize. Turn to a metal fragment he took from the throne room. Behind him, Legia's body slowly begins to fade from existence. The system sends one more message saying, you have leveled up to level 122. One of you switches over to the residence of the national level hunter Christopher Reed, who's an American. He's standing at the front door of his illustrious mansion saying, I wasn't expecting any visitors today. It's been a while, Deputy Director, and you too, Miss Selner. The Deputy Director says, I have something urgent to discuss with you. Would you mind asking everyone to leave? Mr. Reed tells his assistant to not let anyone near his room until the two of them leave. So what brings you all the way out here? If it's to talk about the S-rank gate that spawns somewhere in the East Coast, then let me make myself clear. I'm not going. Elner says, nope, that's not why we're here. It's actually something much more serious than that. Confused, Chris says, something more serious than a S-rank gate? Elner says, Chris, there's a chance you might be killed in the near future.